two things to what you just said. The first is, when you talk about the asymmetry and the fact that you have all these organizations from La Raza to the ACLU who will litigate to make sure that there's no enforcement. Well, it's even more asymmetrical than that because of the fact, and I know this because I worked there for 4 years, is that the Justice Department, particularly the Civil Rights Division, is just now a branch office of those organizations. And I mean almost literally. They not only do the political appointees there and share all the same views on this issue that share with La Raza and Mildef and those organizations, but many of the career lawyers now who've been hired in the past 2 years and who work in the Civil Rights Division, who work on these kind of cases, they all left those organizations to go to work in the Justice Department. So they don't see any difference. And I can tell you that the career lawyers there, and I know this because I write a lot about the Justice Department, I have a lot of sources still there, the lawyers there, whether they're the political appointees or the career lawyers, they don't see their clients as the American people. They consider their clients to be the ACLU, Mildef, and La Raza. Right. And that is one of the reasons that we have what is really an unprecedented lawsuit by the Justice Department against the state of Arizona, which basically put in force in law a policy that states all over the country have been carrying out for years. And the only other thing I was going to say was there are occasionally, as you just said, blue ribbon panels that are set up that actually do have people with widely differing views. And another good example of one, and this was one I was involved in because I was consulted as an expert on it, was the Carter-Baker Commission that was set up after the 2000 presidential election. And this was a commission set up by Jimmy Carter and James Baker to take a look at the American election system and to make recommendations for reform. And they looked at extremely contentious issues in the voting area, like requiring voters to have voter ID when they go vote. And they actually looked at those contentious issues, and like I said, they had widely diverging views on how that should be handled, but they actually did that. And I just don't see that as having happened on these three immigration task forces that Stanley took a look at.
Well, I just have just a couple of comments. First of all, there's a section in the paper on implementation, and it made the point that you have to really be careful about what happens after the bill becomes a law, because of precisely what happened with the last round of amnesties. Precisely that. Everything was litigated. And, sort of Congress caved in on many of it because it became a court issue, and the courts went back and forth on, who could be involved and what kind of papers they needed. Every little thing was, and so that, the gates were opened quite a bit wider than was originally the case, and so, apropos, there's a precedent for that. And I'm struck by the difference between the Carter Commission on the elections that you talked about, and also the Debt Commission. And it makes me wonder, what the difference is about immigration, that there are so many things that you can't even raise. Is it a question of the conventional wisdom is so set cognitively that people simply don't know or don't appreciate that they're swimming in the sea, as Mark said? Or is it something, I don't know. It strikes me as a puzzle, given the alternatives.
I'm not sure it's that. It is puzzling. I've written about it with regard specifically to the left not being able to think outside its box. And, my conclusion was immigration, sort of broadly put, in other words, open borders, for a shorthand purpose, shorthand sense, is an immutable value of the left. In other words, there's no constituency and no issue that an organization won't sacrifice,
right,
if it conflicts with open borders. The ACLU is a good example here. A number of years back, some activist put billboards up in New York City very generic anodyne billboards. One of them, the one that was relevant here, said something like, "Immigration will double America's population in my lifetime." U.S. Census Bureau. It's a picture of a kid. Very kind of generic thing. Take it or leave it. It's just a numbers thing. You know what I mean? The city of New York, city government of New York, came to the owner of the billboard and said that they were going to make his life hell unless he took that thing down. An explicit censorship of political speech. The sponsor of the billboard went to the New York ACLU and said, I mean, guys, this is pretty obvious. I mean, this isn't somebody smearing chocolate on themselves with a grant from the federal government claiming some right. This is actual political speech actually directly being censored by the government. And they said, well, we really can't do anything for you because it's an immigrant right. We have a lot of immigrant rights people in our, so I mean, ACLU, in other words, people who were willing to defend Nazis, waving their obscenities in the faces of Holocaust survivors because of some principle, were unwilling to defend someone who dissented on immigration. Every single constituency or interest group like that, whether it's labor, whether it's black organizations, feminists, it doesn't matter, population control folks, all of them sacrifice the supposed interests that they're defending or promoting if they conflict with immigration. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things
Mark,
that you see.
How does that explain the Brookings Institution finding? Because a number of those people are people who, I don't consider to be anywhere near the left that you're talking about. They seem, much more soft left center types. They certainly know a lot about immigration. How does that get by them?
Yeah, good. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I think it's a whole variety of things. I think because it touches on race and ethnicity in a sort of post-civil rights era, it's a harder thing for people to talk about or think about. And when you combine that with our own mythology, a sort of American, I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's sort of our own American mythology about immigration, it's just becomes, people are paralyzed. They're just, it's impossible for them to think about it without thinking that they're doing something bad or wrong. And so people don't want to think that, so they either avoid the issue altogether or they embrace some view that makes them feel better about themselves.
I think part of
You're the shrink, so I don't know, you tell me.
Well, I don't want to reduce the public problem to a private one. That's verboten.
Right, yes.
I think part of the problem is, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that one of the problems in this area is that the individuals who want open borders and amnesty, they mix together legal and illegal immigration, and they push this assumption, and unfortunately the media picks up on this, that if you're somehow against legalizing people who are here illegally, who've broken our laws to come here, then you must be against all immigrants and you must be against legal immigration. And they conflate the two issues as if they are the same thing.
Right.
And I'm not sure that we are always as careful as we should be in differentiating between the two, because they're two very distinct issues. I mean, they have some overlap, but they're two very distinct issues. And the other side likes to conflate that because that's when they can bring in, these truly, stupid arguments that you're somehow racist or something just because you have particular views on this immigration issue.
Mark, I've got a suggestion for you.
Sure. Oops. Go ahead.
I think what we should do is I think we should get together the Heritage Foundation, CIS, and several other institutions in Washington, and we should look forward to having a conference perhaps in the fall, and we should call that conference Taboo Subjects in Immigration.
Yeah, there you go. Our own, yeah, or our own commission.
I'm
even.
very serious
Yeah.
about that.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. It's a good idea.